Hey guys, this is Jordan. I'm gonna start offering some commentary throughout this to keep it more lively and vibrant. I know some people don't like that, but you're gonna have to bear with it because, hey, no one else is reading this book. I'm just trying to disseminate some information. So let's do this and let's have fun. Thanks for listening. Okay, we're gonna pick up the reading here where we left off last time, and we're still in chapter 2, which is entitled Shinto. The Japanese thus conceive themselves the direct descendants of their own gods. Their Mikado they look upon as the lineal descendants of Ninigi no Mikoto, the first god emperor of Japan, and the gods live in heaven much as men, their descendants, do on earth. The concrete quality of the Japanese mind has barred abstractions on the subject. The gods have never so much as laid down a moral code. Obey the Mikado, and otherwise follow your own heart, is the sum of their commands, as parental injunctions as could well be framed. So is the attitude of the Japanese toward their gods filially familiar, an attitude which shocks more teleologic faiths, but in which they themselves see nothing irreverent. In the same way, their conception of a future life is that of a definite immaterial extension of the present one. To foreign students, in consequence, Shinto has seemed little better than the ghost of a belief, far too insubstantial a body of faith to hold a heart. To ticket its gods and pigeonhole its folklore has appeared to be the end of a study of its cult. Nor is its outward appearance less uninvitingly skeleton-like. With a deal barn of a building for temple, a scant set of deal paraphernalia, and so to speak a deal of nothing else, its appearance certainly leaves something to be desired. For in all save good Puritan souls, the religious idea craves sensuous settings. Feeling is the fuel of faith which sights, sounds, and perfumes fan into flame. Sense may not be of the essence of religion, but incense is. In but one thing is Shinto patiently rich, in gods. It has much to worship. It has as much to worship as it has little to worship with. It has more gods than its devotees know what to do with. From the goddess of the sun to the gods of rice and agriculture, few things in heaven or earth stand unrepresented in its Catholic pantheon, or Catholic pantheon. And if, on a side note, if you don't know what the word Catholic or Catholic means, it means universal. So Catholicism means universalism. It's where all things are mingled into one. So the Catholic religion means the universal religion. And you just look at what Emperor Constantine did with Rome. He had such a big empire. How was he going to get them all to pay taxes? Well, he created the universal religion, the Catholic religion, as the state religion, basically. That way, you could incorporate whatever you already worship into Christianity. They used a type of Christianity, you could say, at the base, and then they mingled everything else into it. So it was a universal religion, and that was an easier way to get people to pay their taxes. Biblical biography puts the number roundedly at 80 myriads, but in Japanese speech, 80 and myriad are neither of them mathematical terms, the one being a mystical number, and the other a conventional confession of arithmetical incompetency, both expressions being rigorously rendered in English by the phrase no end. Nobody ever pretended to count the gods. Indeed, to do so would be pious labor lost, for the roll is being constantly increased by promotions from the ranks. Any one at death may become a god, and it is of the entailed responsibilities of greatness that the very exalted must do so. Of course, no merely finite man can possibly worship so infinite a number of deities, though time be to him of oriental limitlessness. So each makes his choice of intimates and clubs the rest in a general petition from time to time to prevent accidents. His first choice is made for him by his parents. A week after birth, the babe is presented at the temple, Miya Maeri, and put under the protection of some special deity. The god's preference is not consulted in the affair. He becomes tutelary god on notification, as a matter of course. Next in importance to the tutelary god is the patron god, for every branch of human industry is specially superintended by some god. Men may deem it beneath them to be in business, but the gods do not. Each has his own trade and spends much time looking after his apprentices. But it is work without worry, befitting the easygoing East. The god of honest labor being portrayed as a jolly fat fisherman, very comfortably seated, chuckling at having just caught a carp. Pleasures too have their special gods, with whom perforce their notaries are on peculiarly intimate terms, inasmuch as such gods are very boon companion patrons of the sport. Furthermore, everyone chooses his gods for a general compatibility of temper with himself. He thus lives under congenial guardianship all his life. Simple as such conceptions are, there is something fine in their sweet simplicity. The very barrenness of the faith's buildings has a beauty of its own, touched as it is by Japanese taste. Through those gracefully plain portals, a simple life here passes to a yet simpler one beyond, and the solemn cryptomeria lend it all the natural grandeur that so fittingly canopies the old. As a side note, cryptomeria is a Japanese cedar tree. So are the few Shinto rites perfect in effect. Finished fashionings from a far past, they are so beautifully complete that one forgets the frailty of the conception in the rounded perfection of the form. One sees at once how aboriginal all this is. Childish conceptions embalmed in an exquisite etiquette. So Shinto might have been ticketed. But the mythologic mummy showed no evidence of a soul. By the soul of a faith, as opposed to its mere body of belief, I mean that informing spirit vouchsafed by direct communion between God and man, which all faiths proclaim of themselves, and pooh-pooh of all the others. It was this soul that so unexpectedly revealed itself to me upon Ontake. We must now see what the Japanese conceive this soul to be. Now, Shinto philosophy is not the faith's strong point. The Japanese are artists, not scientists. And in their revelations, their gods show the same simple and attractive character. If, therefore, the Shinto scheme of things seem at times incompatible with itself, the gods themselves are responsible, not I, errors and omissions on my part excepted. For I have it all from one whose authority is nothing short of the god's own words, vouchsafed to him in trance, my friend, the high priest of the Shinshui sect. So that my knowledge of the subject is but second-hand divine, much nearer the source of inspiration than I can ever hope in reason to come again. To begin with, then, all things in heaven and earth are composed of three elements: gotai, or karada, body; shinki, mind, or spirit; and tamashi, soul. Stocks and stones, plants, animals, and some men have no soul, being made up entirely of body and mind. The behavior of some men seems to lend support to this theory. Gods, on the other hand, are bodiless and consist of spirit and soul, except the supreme God, Ame no Minakanashi no Mikoto, who is all soul. Shinki, literally God's spirit, is related to Tamashi, soul, much as a substance with its attributes is related to the same substance without them, i.e., water, ice, vapor. If you can manage the conception of the first of these philosophic vacuities, you will find no difficulty with the second. Furthermore, spirit and soul may coexist separately in one body. As the spirit clarifies, that is, becomes more and more blank, it approaches soul, and finally becomes it. The one thing common, therefore, to all things, both of this world and the next, is spirit. Everything from gods to granite has its God spirit. Each spirit is as separate and particular as the body it inhabits, yet it is capable of indefinite expansion or contraction, of permeating matter, and of going and coming according to laws of its own. It may, perhaps, be looked upon provisionally as a gas. Spirit never dies. It only circulates. When a man or animal or plant dies, its body duly decays, but its spirit either lives on alone or returns to those two great reservoirs of spirit, the gods Takami Musubi no Kami and Kami Musubi no Kami. From them, a continual circulation of spirit is kept up through the universe. Whether a spirit's personality persists or not is a matter decided by the Supreme God and depends upon the greatness or the goodness of the defunct. For example, Kan Shoujo, the god of calligraphy, has persisted thus posthumously for almost 1,000 years. It is to be hoped, for the sake of Japan's beautiful brushmanship, that he will continue to survive and be worshipped for some time yet. Spirit is by no means necessarily good. It is manifest that, viewed from the human standpoint, some things are harmful, some harmless, both among plants, animals, and men. The harmful ones are therefore bad. The harmless ones may or may not be good. Why certain inoffensive animals, for example, have got a bad name, or even a good one, is as inscrutable as the cause of the gender of Latin nouns. They are given a bad name, and that is cause enough. It will be observed that in this system of ethics, man has no monopoly of original sin. Similarly, the gods themselves are divided into the sheep and the goats, but by a merciful dispensation of something or other, the good gods are mightier than the bad. Indeed, a certain evolutionary process is going on throughout the universe by which the bad spirits grow good and the good better. It is described as a continued clarification terminating in total blankness. Spirit not only circulates after death, it may do so during life. Usually it does not wander in this way, simply because it is at home where it is and inertia keeps it there. But in some cases, it is not so wedded to the body with which it is associated, and the purer it becomes, the more is it given to occasional volatilizing. Now, esoteric Shinto consists in compelling this spirit to circulate for particular ends. This is not a difficult matter if it is properly undertaken. It is accomplished through self-purification, for the degree of purity determines the degree of possession. Possession is simply the entrance into one body of another's another body's spirit, and the simultaneous expulsion or subjugation of the spirit originally there. This shift of spirit may take place between any two bodies in nature, nor does such interchange differ in kind, no matter what the bodies be. But for the sake of psychology rather than religion, we may profitably consider it under the two aspects of God possession of things and God possession of people. In the case of people, the act of possession is nowadays known as kami oroshi. I would say kami osoroshi, kami utsushi, or kami utsuri. That is, the causing of the gods to come down, the causing the god to transform, or god transformation. The first two names thus view the thing from the human standpoint, the last from the divine. But this is matter of temporary point of view. All three expressions, with others, such as noriutsuri, to change vehicles, being used indifferently according to the speaker's preference. Possession may be partial, complete, or intermediary. That is, the alien spirit may share the head of the person with the native spirit, or it may drive it out, or it may drive it down into the belly. But such degrees of tenancy are grades rather of proficiency attained during novitiate into the cult. In actual possessions, the chief distinction consists in the character of the god who comes. Possession of things are in like manner possible through purity in the person who would bring them about. They are called kamiwaza, or god arts, because originally only the gods, and now only the gods and the godly, can perform them. Before entering upon the miracles, it is necessary to explain the present position of Shinto with regard to these esoteric practices generally. For, though as we shall see when we look later into their history, it is probable that originally they were the common property of all Shintoists, they are not so today. Of the present 10 sects that compose the Shinto church, only 2 practice the possession cult, the Shinshui and the Mitake sects. That they do so while the others do not is not a matter of creed, but of tradition. Though called sects, the Shinto sects are not properly so much sects as sections, for they differ not by differently worshipping an identical god, but by identically worshipping different gods. Each of them likewise worships, though with less assiduity, all the others' gods. Each looks specially to the great shrine dedicated to its special gods, and all but 2, one of which is a sort of general bureau of church organism, make pilgrimages to their shrine once or twice a year. These sects date only from since the time of the revival of pure Shinto 20 years ago. And as a side note, this book was written in 1894, and so that's probably around 1874 or so. We heard him make reference to that back in the previous chapter. But under another name, the professors of the cult hold it in unbroken practice from the far past. Whether during the time of Shinto's long eclipse the possession cult was kept up by the few remaining pure Shintoists, if indeed there can be said to have been any pure Shintoists then at all, is doubtful, although the priests today assert that it was always practiced by the pious in secret. Certain it is, however, that during the lapse of Shinto from national regard practice of the cult passed to all intents and purposes to a hybrid of Shinto and Buddhism known as Ryobu, or both, because it was indeed manufactured of both creeds. The great Kobo Daishi is the reputed father of Ryobu. This worthy soul, who, by the way, was never called Kobo Daishi, while he was called anything, he was known as Kukai, so long as he was known at all, was the founder of the Shingon sect of Buddhism in Japan. He seems to have been singularly energetic. The peaks he climbed, the pictures he painted, and the divers deeds of one sort and another which he accomplished would have kept Methuselah on the jump for the whole of his millennial life. And That's a reference to the biblical Methuselah, who was Noah, the one who built the ark and the flood. His grandpa was Methuselah. He was supposed to have lived 969 years, which would be the oldest person in recorded biblical history. Okay. Nevertheless, he found time amid it all to invent Ryobu. His invention consisted in a judicious hodgepodge of Shinto and Buddhist popularities. His diligence met its reward. The newly invented faith instantly became very popular because it let everybody in. Oh, so it was like the Buddhist, Shinto, Catholic. It was essentially an open-air faith, much given to mountaineering, a trait it might be supposed to have inherited from its father, were it not instinctive in a Japanese to climb. Ryobu has more than one sect, but it was only the Ontake sect of the belief that practiced God possession. It kept the cult alive for 1,000 years, and then, when pure Shinto was revived at the time of the Restoration, and hybrids were abolished by imperial edict, the Ontake Ryobuist came back again into the Shinto fold. Besides Ryobu, some of the Buddhist sects early saw the advantage of being intimate with deity. The Kobodaishi, after being taught the means to do it by the Shinto Emperor Sangha, so it is said, not satisfied with inventing Ryobu and incorporating it in that, boldly took it for his own Shingon sect of Buddhism. And the Shingon sect still practices the cult today. Dinkyo Daishi, the founder of the Tendai sect, was likewise captivated by it and incorporated it into his belief. Lastly, the Nichiren sect learned the art and indulges in it now more than either of the other two. We thus find at the present time among the professors of the cult some Shintoist, some Ryobuist, and some Buddhists, each claiming it stoutly for its own. Alright, and then the next chapter is entitled Miracles, and we'll get into that next time. Moving right along here, we will get into the next chapter entitled Miracles. Dullards will always deem delicacy incompatible with strength. To touch a subject lightly is for them not to touch it at all. Yet the phrase dead in earnest might perhaps hint to them that there is more virtue in liveliness than they suspect. It is quite possible to see the comic side of things without losing sight of their serious aspect. In fact, not to see both sides is to get but a superficial view of life, missing its substance. So much for the people. As for the priests, it is only necessary to say that few are more essentially sincere and lovable than the Shinto ones, and few religions, in a sense, more true. With this preface for life preserver, I plunge boldly into the miracles. Kamiwaza, or god arts, are of many sorts, but to Japanese piety are all of a kind, though some are spectacular, some merely useful. Causing the descent of the thunder god, calling down fire from heaven, rooting burglars to the spot, and so forth. To say nothing of killing snakes and bringing them to life again, together with innumerable like performances, are all included in the category, and are all simple enough affairs to the truly good. They're all simple enough affairs to the truly good. Nichiren, for example, broke into the blade of his would-be executioner by exorcism taught him of the Shinto priests. The fact, without the explanation, may be read of it in histories of Japan. In Shinto, the miracles are not so important matters as the incarnations, for good reason, since the god but shows his power in the one case, his self in the other. Yet the Church takes pleasure in displaying them for pious purposes. Any fete day, which is like a festival, any fete day of the possessing sex is more likely than not to have a miracle for central show. And for his great semi-annual festivals, my friend, the head priest of the Shinshui sect, has announcement of a couple of them printed regularly as special attractions on his invitation cards. So far as piety classifies them at all, it does so according to their scenic effect or for the difficulty of doing them. From a psychologic point of view, however, they fall very conveniently under two heads: subjective miracles and objective ones. An account of the former may properly proceed, since it includes those which, on the whole, are considered the greater. Chief among the subjective miracles are what are called collectively the Sankei. That's Sankei, or the three great rites. The bond connecting the trio is apparently purely extrinsic, consisting solely in agreement and greatness. In consequence, on very important festivals lasting 2 or 3 days, they are performed in turn successively. The first and the simplest of these three great rites is the Kugadachi, or ordeal by boiling water. The word Kugadachi is archaic Japanese. In Hepburn's dictionary, a dagger stabs it obsolete. The further the departed is given no character. Furthermore, the departed is given no character, being epitaphed solely in the Japanese side-script. Such absence of ideograph implies for the expression an age antedating the time when the Japanese learned to write. So yeah, it looks like the dictionary here metaphorically stabs the word to death and says it's totally obsolete, no use for it, and all that stuff. Doesn't give any commentary on it whatsoever. So he's saying that fact alone shows it dates back to a long time ago when the Japanese were first learning to write. An inference fully borne out of by folklore. For the ordeal is mentioned more than once in the Kojiki, and seems to have been quite popular in prehistoric times. In those direct days, it was applied as touchstone to actual guilt. In these more teleologic times, merely as test of theocratic guilelessness. The arrangements for the rite are primitively picturesque. A huge iron pot, as it might be some witch's cauldron, is ceremoniously set in the midst of the garden or court. About it is then built a magic square. 4 cut bamboo, tufted at their tops, are stuck into the ground some 8 feet apart. From frond to frond are hung hempen ropes. This makes an airy sort of palisade designed to keep out the undesirable devils. Just outside of this space, thus enclosed, is placed a deal table, on which 1 or more deal boxes, open on the side, make consecrated pedestals for the gohei. That's the wand. The gohei are very important affairs, of which I shall have much to say later. For the moment, I will suffice to state that they are zigzag strips of paper festooning a wand, and are the outward and visible symbols of the gods. In front of them upon the table stands a saucer of salt, while behind them bamboo fronds stuck into stands rise into a background of plumes. Spring water is then brought in and poured into the cauldron. On my first occasion of witnessing the miracle, I was at this point graciously permitted to dab my little finger into the water. I quite fail now to see why I desired to do so, but I am very glad I did. My request turned out a most discreet indiscretion, productive of much spiritual significance later on. A fire was then kindled beneath, and we, professionals and amateurs, stood round about the square, watching for the water to boil. When at last the steam started to rise, the officiating acolyte emerged from the holy bathhouse nearby, where he had been purifying himself, clad in a single white robe. That is, the robe was white. Theoretically. Practically, it was post-diluvian gray, a hue which the rite soon sufficiently explained. Let's see. Somewhere along the line, there was a little point. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, yes, where it says, while behind them bamboo fronds stuck into stands rise into a background of plumes. There's a little note down here. The wood I have here and elsewhere translated deal, on account of its appearance, which is simple to a degree, is the hinoki, literally sunwood. The thuya, obtusa, or arbor vitae. Its name, sunwood, is said by some priestly expositors to be due to its having furnished the prehistoric two sticks from whose rubbing first came fire. Oh, that's interesting. Well, let's see. He in Japanese, it could mean sun, but it could also mean fire. All right, let's see. Just depends on what character is being used. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah, okay. On entering the mystic square, he clapped his hands, the invariable Japanese method, this, of summoning anybody from the gods to servants. It is worth noting here, as instancing the familiar terms on which the Japanese stand with their gods, that they should thus that they should thus indifferently summon deities and domestics. The young priest then started to circumambulate the kettle through a whole series of rites, each made up of an endlessly similar basis of speech and action. Now, it is all very well to preach against vain repetitions, but with anthropomorphic gods, as with ordinary mortals, it simply has to be done if one would succeed in one's request. The Shinto priests realize this fact, and thoroughly act upon it. Too thoroughly to suit one who looks impatiently past the repetitions to their result. Like all good works, its practical effect is on the worker. Pantomime and prayer wove the double strand on which his more particular beads of rosary were told. Uncouth finger twists and monotonic formulae pointed by expressive guttural grunts. Upon this undercurrent of well-nigh automatic action, the man was insensibly carried along through successive cycles of rite. Beginning at the north end of the square, he first made incantation facing the cauldron, then walking absorbedly round to the south, digitating as he did so. He faced the kettle and repeated his spell. Continuing as before, he went through the same performance at the west side, then at the east, the northwest, the northeast, and the southwest, making thus at least a half circuit between each point. All this was most particular, though as a matter of fact the orientation of the points was hypothetical. This constituted the simple motif, as it were. No sooner was it completed than he started on it again with variations. First it was salt. From the saucer on the stand he helped himself to a handful of this, and making circuits of the kettle as before, deposited a pinch of it at each of the compass points in turn, digitating with the free hand as he did so, after the manner of one enjoining implicit compliance with his act. After this, he tossed more salt into the air toward each of the four quarters of the heavens. In the same way, he made the rounds with a flint and steel, scattering sparks at the proper places. Then he took the goheiwan and exorcised the water in like fashion by cuts in the air of imprecatory violence. Lastly, he made the circuit with 2 bamboo fronds, one in each hand, which he dipped into the seething liquid, and then lifting them, loaded with boiling water, lashed the air above his head, the spray falling in a scalding shower bath all over him. This he did north, south, east, west, and then over again from the beginning, on in one continuous round. To this boiling shower bath there seemed no end. Round and round the man went, religiously compassing his points, repeating the scalding douche at each with ever-growing self-abandonment. Up to this final phase of the affair, he had seemed to be carrying on the right. Now the right seemed to be carrying him on. Still, circuit after circuit he made, his exaltation rising with each fresh dip, till he was as one possessed, lashing maniacally first the water and then the air with the fronds, scattering the scalding douche not only over himself, but over all the innocent bystanders as well, giving them thus, by the way, the most convincing proof of the genuineness of the feat. Higher and higher rose the pitch of his possession, till, at last, nature could no further go, and from the acme of his paroxysm, he all at once collapsed into a lump of limp rag upon the ground. The others rushed in and bore him away, the wilted semblance of a man. While he was gone to prepare himself once more for this world, the high priest explained to me the spirit of the right. The moon, it seems, is the cause of it all, a first step in elucidation, to follow which requires less stretch of the Western imagination than the next succeeding one. For that lunacy-inducing body is, it appears, the origin of water. On the lucus a non principle, we must suppose, inasmuch as it has none to speak of. But whatever the cause, the spirit of water resides in the moon. The spirit of cold water, be it understood, cold water and hot water being, in Japanese eyes, quite different substances with different names. Let's see. The spirit of hot water is the spirit of fire. This rose to the water in the cauldron from the fire below at the moment the water boiled. Now, as the priest quaintly put it, just as there are veins in a man's body and fissures in the earth, so are there arteries in the air, and to each spirit its own arteries. When therefore the spirit of water is properly besought, it descends from its abode to the moon. When therefore the spirit of water is properly besought, it descends from its abode, the moon, by its appropriate paths, and dispossesses the spirit of fire, which sinks back again to the charcoal whence it came, and of course the hot water is no longer hot. This happy result is worked to easier perfection amid the purity of the peaks. It is, of course, an irrelevant detail that water at those altitudes should boil at a lower temperature. The thin air of the peaks is, for purely pious reasons, conducive to all manner of ether realization. In addition to the lunar action on the boiling water, the performer himself is, so the priest said, temporarily possessed by the lunar spirit, and so is rendered insensible to the heat, which, as we just saw, does not exist, so that the second action might seem to savor the superfluous. A double negative of sorts appears, however, to make assurance doubly sure. When the man returned, clothed and in his right mind once more, he was asked whether he felt the heat of the water during the ordeal. He replied that sometimes he did and sometimes he did not. In this instance, he said he had felt nothing. He was a frail-looking youth of ecstatic eye, evidently a good subject, though still in the early stages of his novitiate. The head priest, a much stronger man and an adept, said he always felt the water, but not the heat, an interesting distinction. Here came in the importance of my dabble into the basin. Though it had been but to the extent of a little finger, and that by religious permission, it appeared partially spoiled the miracle on that side of the cauldron, preventing the water there from becoming as cold as elsewhere. For the acolyte averred that he had perceived a difference between the two, but he had just said that he had not felt the heat of any part of it. He had therefore detected a distinction without a difference, a degree of divinity quite transcending this simply not feeling at all. Yet he was unconscious at the time, and conscientious afterward. By partially spoiling the miracle, then, it would seem that I had considerably improved it. Next, we'll be getting into the second miracle of the three great rites. And it's the Hiwatari, or the walking barefoot over a bed of live coals.